Are you facing a divorce you do not want, or realizing that your spouse wants nothing to do with you and it's breaking your heart? Are you desperate to know what to do to get your spouse back and heal your marriage? Join me and I'll tell you how. As a couples coach, a very common request that I hear is, help me get my spouse back. What do I need to do to get my spouse back? Well, I'm going to tell you what I tell them. I can't help you do that. I cannot give you a recipe or a formula to get your spouse back to you. What I can do is help you work on you. And that often will bring your spouse back. So I cannot help you save your marriage. When you coach with me, it's not about saving your marriage, because your marriage is a reflection of you. And what I can do is help you get really clear about what you're contributing to the current state of your marriage. And when you begin to take responsibility for you, when you begin to work on you, often your spouse will come back because you're changing and you're attracting something very different in them than you have been attracting up until this point. So if you're in that state of crisis, I feel you. I've been there. And I want to get something in your hands that I believe can help you a lot. I'm going to continue to help you in this episode and give you the first details of what I would share with a spouse who reaches out to me, asking me to help them save their marriage. But I also want to get you something that's going to help you go deeper. And that is my ebook called Turn Defensiveness into Connection. And I think, the beauty of it is what it's going to do is help you know how to face the conflicts and the challenges in your marriage that often are the ones that feel like they're the biggest problem. I'm going to teach you how to start addressing those, and the name of the book is called Turn Defensiveness into Connection, because usually those are the areas that are creating the most defensive reactions, which are causing the most distance and disconnection and avoidance in the marriage. So if you want to get a hold of that, look in the description right underneath this video and click the first link, and it'll get you my ebook and help you go even deeper. So as we look at what does it take, if you want to get your spouse back, I'm going to ask you to take your eyes off of them, and I'm going to invite you to put your eyes on yourself, because marriage is a mirror reflecting you back to yourself. So your spouse is responding often to you and what you're projecting into the marriage. And if you will begin to work on you and look at those deeper things that are driving you, those deeper wounds, that suffering that you don't even know is there, that's what's going to transform the relationship and have the power to transform the relationship. Whether the marriage, ends and the two of you are just going to be co-parents, you're going to want a better way of communicating than you currently have. And I can guarantee you I can help you do that. And I can tell you countless couples that have come to me with their marriage thinking there's no hope for the marriage. I can tell you I was in that situation. I did not think I wanted my marriage anymore. However, what I knew is that the marriage was trying to teach me something, that the brokenness of what our relationship had become was a lot about me. And when I started doing the work on me, it left my husband to do the work on him. And when we both started working on ourselves, what we began to develop was beyond anything we'd ever had before or thought was possible. And I can tell you countless stories of my clients who have come to me in a state of despair. Their marriage seemed all but over, and they started working on themselves. Their spouse, they did not do any work in the beginning. The person who came to me started working on themselves, and what began to gradually happen was what started reflecting back in the relationship started looking different, and the other spouse started taking interest. I just had a spouse where this spouse actually just got on their first phone call with me. They've been working on their marriage diligently, or she's been working on the marriage diligently for a year. And in that time, they separated a couple times because they just didn't think the marriage was going to work. The husband wasn't really doing a lot of work on him. But he got on his first coaching call with me the other day, and he said, I just want to thank you. we are experiencing a marriage miracle. I don't know how you did it, but the biggest problem that I had in our marriage is my wife thought I was the problem. And so every conversation was about me. And I didn't think there was ever any hope that she would ever look at herself. And he said, what changed our marriage is she took the first steps and started working on her. And once she started working on her, I wanted to work on myself. And while that may not be the best approach, that might not be, what you would like it to be, I've watched that happen over and over again. So if you want your spouse back, I'm going to encourage you to work on you. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means taking personal responsibility for who you're being. Who are you? How are you showing up one moment at a time? Now, a lot of this starts with growing self-awareness. Like, what is driving you to feel the way you're feeling? What is driving you to get so upset and so angry when your spouse says something? What is driving you to have really no interest in, what your spouse has interest in? All of these things are about you. They're about who you are and how you're showing up to the relationship. Richard Rohr says that whatever we don't let transform us, we transmit. Now, I was transmitting a lot of suffering from my past into my marriage, and I was unaware of it. Sure, I knew I'd walked through a couple hard things when I was a kid, but I didn't realize that I had a lot of emotional trauma, a lot of trauma to work through physically, mentally, emotionally from my past that I was projecting into every interaction with my spouse. I began to discover that and become more aware of that. The more self-awareness I grew, I began to actually, personal responsibility is looking at your impact. What are the impact of your choices? I was very aware of how my husband was hurting me, but I was not really aware. I couldn't even see how I was hurting him. And one day I asked him, my husband had walked into an affair or had started having an affair. And so I just kept getting so upset because I would never hurt him that way. That's what I told myself. And so I kind of had this superior attitude, like, I'm the better one here because I've taken you back and, I would never have done what you did to me. And if I did that to you, you'd never take me back. Well, I could tell I was becoming aware that this story I had going on in my mind was not working. It was causing me a lot of resentment and bitterness towards my husband that I knew I needed to heal. And so I decided to get a lot more curious about my impact. How was I impacting him? And so I was just vulnerable with him and asked him, I feel like you have hurt me in ways I've never hurt you. And I think it's my own lack of awareness. Can you help me understand how I've hurt you? And without a second thought, without one split waiting to figure it out, he knew immediately. He said, it's that look that you give me. And there's a long story behind that, but I needed him to help me see what he was talking about because I was so unaware of my impact on him. I was so unaware of this look. And so I asked him, the next time I give you that look, will you tell me? And so he did. The next time we were in a big argument, I gave him that look and he said, that's the look. Go look in the mirror. And I went in the mirror and I looked and I saw my look of contempt. I saw the reflection of my mother looking back at me, how my mother used to look at me as a child. And it broke my heart. I began to explore, what did that look mean to my husband? And because I was so used to it growing up, I didn't think it was that big a deal. But when I heard someone who'd never experienced someone giving him that kind of look before, and he really shared his heart about the impact it was having on him, it broke my heart. And that's just one example of many different places I began to explore my impact on him, on my children, all these things, and started taking personal responsibility for it. Personal responsibility is looking at who you are. Who are you, right? Are you love? Or are you arrogant? Or are you prideful? Are you a coward? Are you generous? Are you scarce? These are all forms. Every single human has these things in them. Just like you were given a liver, you were given a heart, you were given, lungs, all these things you got in the assembly line of you being created. You also got a lot of things you'd rather not admit, like you got cowardice, and you got jealousy, you got pride, you got arrogance, you got anger, you got all these things you'd rather not look at. And personal responsibility is looking at who you are moment by moment. We're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes, but looking at who you are moment by moment, that's taking personal responsibility. No matter how ugly your spouse is being to you, who are you in the moment? Now, being a doormat, that's just as much of a problem. If you've been a doormat when your spouse gets angry, that is important for you to look at and take personal responsibility, because being a doormat invites you to be abused. So when I'm inviting you to say, who are you? Part of it might be you need to have a whole lot more courage. You need to have a whole lot more stamina to stand up to the anger, because when you don't stand up to that violence and abuse coming out of your spouse, you're inviting the narcissist in them to grow. So it's looking at who you are moment by moment is going to be vital. And a lot of it is looking at what isn't working for your spouse. When your spouse is abandoning you, when your spouse is betraying you, there's a lot that's not working for them in the marriage. And they likely have been communicating that in small ways. Maybe they needed to take a lot more responsibility themselves and communicate that a lot more clearly. I'm sure that's true. However, where have you been unwilling to listen? My husband was subtly letting me know that things were not working for him in the marriage, but I didn't want to look at that. I only was looking at what wasn't working for me. Personal responsibility was me starting to look at what was I doing that wasn't working. Because sure, it's easy to walk away from the marriage. It's easy to just say, fine, my spouse betrayed me. This is over. This is done. I'll find someone who'll treat me better. What I'll tell you is, if you do not take personal responsibility for who you are, how you show up in the marriage, what you contribute to what's not working in the marriage, you're going to go to the next relationship and you'll create the same thing. Now, it may look a little different, but you'll create the same thing. And you'll create the same thing in your relationships with your children as they age and they start showing up in challenging ways. So this personal responsibility is the most important thing that you can do. Rather than focusing on winning your spouse back, I'm going to encourage you to focus on winning you back. Winning back where you've up until now been abandoning yourself, blaming other people for how you feel, ignoring your feelings, numbing your feelings, judging and criticizing your own feelings. These are ways that you abandon yourself. What I'm inviting you into is owning yourself. Take responsibility for how you're feeling, what's driving you to feel that way. And that's going to bring you into some deep character development where you begin to develop your ability to be who you want to be, no matter how challenging the situation is. And when you're in a state like you're in, there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of opportunities, right? Maybe you're in a situation where your spouse is pretty shut down and they're refusing to talk to you. Great. That's a beautiful opportunity to look at who you're being. How are you going to show up in that? How are you going to take a stand for love? Are you just going to make them the problem and say, forget it, they don't want to talk to me, so there's nothing I can do? Well, if you're divorcing, you're going to need to start having some conversations. If there's betrayal in the marriage, you're going to need to start having conversations. If you have children, you're going to need to find a way to communicate. So who are you going to be when they refuse to talk to you? Are you going to make them the problem? Are you going to have empathy? Are you going to say, you know what, I see you. I see that you're very upset about something and I am willing to take responsibility for my part in the upset. And at the same time, we need to talk. We need to have some honest conversations. So I'm here. When you're ready to talk, I'm here and I'm ready to take responsibility for me. That can begin to shift the shutdown in the marriage. You know, when your spouse gets defensive with you and they're blowing up and they're ignited and angry and frustrated and accusing you and calling you names. Who are you? Who do you become? Do you take it? Do you fight back? Do you, try and defend yourself? Those things are only going to kind of push them further away. They're only going to create more distance, more connection. The opportunity is to say, who do I become? Who do I want to be when my spouse is defensive? Because what I can tell you is when they're being defensive, the reason we get defensive as humans is because we feel threatened. We feel like the other person is attacking us or hurting us, right? So are you able to stand there and say, hey, I see you. I care for you. I see your defensive reaction. Can we take 5 minutes? Can we calm down? Can you help me understand where you're feeling attacked or where you're feeling hurt or where you're feeling like you don't have a voice in this situation? I want to hear you, and I want to develop a way of communicating where we each can hear and understand each other. These are all opportunities. When your marriage is in crisis, there is powerful opportunities for you to take responsibility for you. No matter how difficult your spouse is being, it's an opportunity to learn and grow, and you're not going to get it right. You're going to mess up. You're going to miss it. You're going to get defensive back. You're going to want to retaliate. You're going to have blown up, right? No problem. Who do you become in the moments that you don't show up in the way you want to become, who you want to be? You know, you just own it. Like, wow, will you forgive me? That's not how I want to treat you. That's not who I want to be. Can we go again? I'm committed to develop open and honest communication with you where we both feel seen and heard. I don't know where the marriage is going to end up. I don't know how this is going to work out. However, what I do know is we're going to need to keep communicating. And I want to communicate with you in ways where you feel respected and I feel respected. And I want to go again in this moment. So these are the opportunities that you get to develop yourself. And what I can tell you is, while I don't know if it'll save the marriage, it can save you, and it can help you create a relationship worth having moving forward. I can tell you, if it gives you hope, my husband's parents were divorced for 6 years and had no hope that the marriage was going to work. And 6 years later, they got remarried. So even if the marriage ends, it's not too late. And the key to any hope of a relationship in the future is you taking 100% responsibility for you. So I want to invite you into that, and I'm here. I want to help you. I want to support you. If this connects with you and you feel this is a journey that you're not hearing elsewhere, I want to invite you to take that first step and click that link in the description under this video and grab that ebook called Turn Defensiveness into Connection. If you liked this video, if you found it valuable, would you give it a thumbs up? And if you want to hear more things like that, make sure you click that subscribe button, and I will be here connecting with you episode after episode, helping you create the marriage that you long for. Thanks for joining me.